Should you write a book or should you write a screenplay? Whether it's a screenplay for TV or for movies, it's sometimes tempting for newer writers to write a screenplay instead of writing a book because there's this perceived easier aspect to it. It's a little bit shorter. You have a collaborative process. You might have it out there and get more famous if you're writing this sort of thing. There's the glamour of the Hollywood ideal, but is that realistic? And do I, as a professional writing coach, think that authors, especially newer authors, should write screenplays rather than writing books? I have had a lot of writers come to me recently, especially telling me that they were thinking of scrapping their book idea and jumping into a screenplay, whether it's for a movie or a TV series. And I think that that is because of the perceived advantages. And maybe it's just a trend right now, but I thought it would be really useful in this episode of the How to Be an Author podcast for me to lay out the pros and cons of writing a screenplay versus writing a book. I really want to lay it out there without some of these fantasy things like, oh, I'll get famous, I'll be in Hollywood. Let's talk about the actual nitty-gritty of what kind of skills you need, what kind of promotion you need, how you're going to sell these things, and why I think that you might want to consider writing a book first at the end of the day. So let's jump right into this question of book versus screenplay for newer writers and writers with a little bit more experience today on the How to Be an Author podcast. If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation. Hello, and welcome to the How to Be an Author podcast. I am your writing coach, Karena Akhavein, PhD, and I might have a PhD in literature, but I like to make the process of reaching your writing career goals as simple and as easy as possible. And I do that by breaking things down and removing the layers of BS that trip so many people up. I like to have you breaking through your blocks and make the process a lot less painful. So many people have come to me saying that they wanted to write a screenplay instead of writing a book because they thought it would be less painful. They thought that it would be a faster process, less pages, that maybe they would have the help of another creative professional, a director, a producer, an actor, who would actually be helping to translate what their vision is. They feel like maybe they're going to be, in Hollywood is going to be super glamorous, and they're not going to have to write these beautiful sentences and poetry and character arcs and all of this. And I don't think that's necessarily true. And so I thought I would demystify this whole idea of screenplay versus book. So let's talk about the actual pros and cons. Maybe the pros first of writing a screenplay. So yes, there is that idea of the visual storytelling, and there's the dialogue, there's the action, there's scene descriptions. And this is really appealing to writers who excel in creating more cinematic experiences, or maybe writers who grew up watching movies or watching TV and who have learned how to write that way. Sometimes I'll read something that a writer has written, even in a book, and I'm like, wow, you're a great visual storyteller. And yes, that's a talent then that can be basically carried over to writing a screenplay, but that's not all you need, right? But that is something that it is fun for some people to write that way. Another pro in writing a screenplay is the potential for adaptation. When you've got a successful screenplay, it can be adapted into films or TV shows, and it offers visibility in the entertainment industry and the potential for reaching a wide audience, because maybe more people will watch that Netflix show than would pick up your book. That's possible, but it doesn't always happen that way, right? There's a lot of competition and things can be adapted, but remember that a book can also be adapted. So it's harder to take a TV show and then say, I'm going to write this into a book that's going to be really great. It goes in the other direction so much more. But another thing that authors really fantasize about when they're thinking about writing a screenplay is they're thinking about that collaboration. Those directors, producers, and actors, they are going to boost your vision and they are going to translate it as well. And it's really going to help to take your story into something that seems a lot more complete without as much work, perceived work on your part. But we're going to talk about the cons of that soon, don't you worry. But that is something that a lot of writers think is going to be really fun and really useful for them. The other thing that a lot of writers really like about the screenplay is that it is a much shorter format. It's concise storytelling, it's focused on plot and dialogue, and this really suits writers who have a hard time getting enough words on the page. If you've been struggling to get to 80, 90, or 100,000 words, and you feel like your writing is a little bit spare, maybe you feel that you are more suited to the screenwriting format. Yes, that's possible, but I think that sometimes it's good to challenge yourself to create that description, because if you're not able to provide that in your script, then your creative vision is probably not going to be coming through completely. So don't go thinking that writing a screenplay is all super easy, streamlined, fun, collaborative, because there are some cons. Number one, there is significant technical mastery required. So you thought writing was hard. Writing a screenplay demands mastering specific formatting rules. You have to understand the visual storytelling techniques. You know how to craft dialogue that advances the plot effectively. And if you've listened to my podcast about writing dialogue, or if you watch some of my videos, or you've taken my course where I teach you how to write effective dialogue, in a book, you can have dialogue that skews a little bit longer. In a movie or a TV show, bad dialogue shows up right away. So you have to definitely be learning some new skills. It's not as easy as it looks. Another con of the whole screenwriting thing is the limited control over the final product. Since filmmaking is collaborative, writers may have less control over the interpretation and the execution compared to their novel, where the only person who's going to be transforming anything might be your editor, who's making basically suggestions. So your novel tends to be pretty much what you put into it. And when it's a movie, it can really change so much. In fact, you can write the original script and they're going to hand it over to a whole other writer, and there's not much you can do about that. So forget the glory. You're not going to really necessarily have your name attached to the final product. So that can be really frustrating. Another thing is, you think that writing is competitive. Breaking into the film industry and getting a screenplay produced, that can be super challenging as well. There is really high competition, and script selection is super competitive and subjective because you're making something that costs money to make. Now, if you're writing a book, you can actually end up self-publishing. There's no self-publishing really in the film industry unless you're making kind of a student film looking thing, and that ends up looking a little bit amateur. So think about that when you are trying to weigh the pros and cons of screenwriting versus writing a book. Now, when I think of the pros of writing a book, I think about the creative control. You have full creative control as the author over your story, your characters, your world building. And when you're a writer who enjoys the detailed exploration of something and who enjoys narrative depth and who's got these characters in their mind, well, there's nothing like a book to be able to really delve into that. Also, with books, they have some level of prestige. They attract readers through their literary merit. And you can have so many different ways in which you can shine as a writer. So you can have this immersive storytelling, you can have great character development, you can have an amazing setting, and each of these things is another opportunity to attract a different type of reader. You also have the opportunity to do so many different genres. You can have nonfiction, fiction, poetry. And then you have different formats like ebooks, print, audiobooks. So there's so much flexibility in the storytelling and in audience engagement. Whereas when you've done a screenplay and it's a TV show, it's now a TV show forever. It's not going to become an audiobook after that. So that's important to realize. I think that also books have kind of this long-term potential with ongoing sales through either traditional publishers or self-publishing platforms offering you continuous income and reader discovery. Whereas if you've done a screenplay and it's on Netflix for a minute and then it's not on Netflix anymore, well, where is it? Where are you making money from this thing? It might be a more short-lived success. But of course, when it comes to writing a book, yeah, there's a longer time investment when you're writing a novel. You have that extensive plotting, character development, the complexity of your narrative. So it takes a longer time in general to write a book than to write a screenplay, for sure. Also, again, just like screenplays, the book market is highly competitive as well. There are thousands of new titles published every year, so it is challenging for new writers to stand out and attract readers. But I still feel like with social media and Bookstagram and Book Talk, all of these things, I feel like maybe you have a few more chances still to succeed versus being part of this whole Hollywood or TV, Netflix machine where it's kind of hard to break into that as well. Now, when you're trying to think about what you should choose, what are some of the key considerations? Whether you should choose a book or a screenplay. What are your personal strengths and preferences? You really need to choose the format that aligns with your strengths. So, are you good at the visual storytelling? Are you really good at dialogue? Or are you much better at in-depth explorations, character development, settings, etc.? In which case you should be looking at writing a book. What are your creative goals? Do you really want to see your story on screen? Is that what you love? Is that what makes your heart sing? In that case, you know what? It might be harder, but sure, go do the screenplay. Or would you love to create a literary work that resonates with readers over time? That definitely means that a book is right for you. Given the same story idea, you might want to kind of weigh what the market and the audience is for each genre or for each medium. So look at the industry trends. For that sort of story, where are you going to find the most success and resonance? Is it going to be in a screenplay or is it going to be in a book? I think that that's really interesting for you to try to figure out because some things are super popular in TV shows that would not be popular for a book and vice versa. So definitely consider that. And remember the learning curves associated with each format. Can you master the production dynamics, the formatting that come with writing a screenplay? Or can you master the formatting and the whole kind of rigmarole you need to go through to publish a book? All of those do necessitate a learning curve. Nobody is born knowing how to do these things. So you definitely are going to want to think about those things. And I know that, again, the perceived advantages of writing a screenplay, there are plenty of those, but there are plenty of misconceptions as well. The realities of the market, I know that so many people tend to try to discourage you, but that's because the market's pretty saturated either way. So really, at the end of the day, it comes down to your personal strengths and your personal goals and your preferences. All of these, if they align with you. This is not what your friend, the other writer, would do. This is not what your writing coach necessarily told you to do. But for me, I really think that no matter what, writing the book is actually preferable for a newer writer because at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you end up with something that you had full creative control over, and you end up with your book in your hand. If you wrote a screenplay and it doesn't go anywhere, you kind of end up with nothing. You're not going to kind of publish your screenplay in book form and hope to sell copies of it on Amazon. That's not happening. So you might be wondering, okay, how do I sell these things? Because this is a huge consideration, I think, when you're thinking about selling a screenplay or selling a book, selling your work. These are different processes. And this is my whole platform as a writing coach that is not just about the craft of writing these things. It's also about the business of doing these things. And each one of these, the screenplay or the book, they have their own challenges and opportunities. So when you're selling a screenplay, you really need to have film industry connections. So you need to be networking with the film industry or TV industry. You need connections with producers, directors, film production companies, all of that. Now, if you're not living somewhere where you have access to those sorts of people and those sorts of entities, or if you're not the kind of person who's really comfortable with a lot of networking, selling a screenplay is going to be really tough. Now, one option is screenplay competitions. There are reputable screenplay competitions out there, and they can provide exposure and opportunities for recognition. And potentially they can lead to a sale or representation. But, again, the chances of winning one of these is pretty slim. So you have to think about that. You also have some screenwriting websites that allow screenwriters to showcase their work and connect with industry professionals. But, it's kind of hard to shine in these websites where there's a lot of junk. And then some industry professionals, I feel like they get sick of having to wade through the junk. They would rather wait until somebody just hands them something on a silver platter. When it comes to selling your screenplay, you're going to need to be pitching directly to producers or executives. You're going to have to present that screenplay concept in a really compelling way that's highlighting the marketability and the potential appeal. This means selling. So if you're the kind of person who's like, I'm an artist, I'm a creative, and I don't sell, are you going to be able to do this? I don't know. Securing representation from a literary agent or a manager with connections in the film industry can definitely increase your script's visibility and chances of a sale. But in that case, you might as well have a literary agent for your book who also sees that your book has the potential to be made into a script in the future. That's really interesting. Many times screenplays will be sold through option agreements where a production company pays for the exclusive right to develop the script into a film within a specific period. But oftentimes you can sell a book as something that is optioned to make into a script because scripts get developed, right? They get stars attached to them. Things change. Again, this is what I was talking about with the creative control and about how things can change from beginning to end. When it comes to selling a book, you're going to be going through literary agents. These are the people who specialize in representing manuscripts to traditional publishing houses. You definitely want to listen to my other podcast on how to attract a literary agent. And also, if you're taking my course From Idea to Published in 6 months, which you're going to want to jump on soon because it is going up in price so much, it's going to super premium very soon. And if you're in, you're in. But I definitely teach you step by step how to get a literary agent. It's not an easy process, but it is something that with practice, you'll probably get better at getting the interest of agents. But you have to remember, again, there's a lot of competition. You also have publishing houses that might accept submissions directly from authors, and that can be interesting as well. But again, get used to being rejected time and time again. But here's the thing with a book that you do not get with a screenplay. You've got the self-publishing option. You can self-publish your books through platforms like Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, Apple Books, and a bunch of others, which means that you have the opportunity to reach a global audience directly. You cannot do that with a screenplay. So the whole idea of the query letter, the book proposal, all of that stuff, if that is too much for you, you can still end up with a published book in your hands without anybody telling you that you can't. So that's really important. Now, you might be wondering, what are some of the factors that are going to impact or influence my potential success? Basically, as a recap, for a screenplay, it's going to be market demand a lot because there are trends and there are demands of the film or TV industry. And these demands can be a little bit unpredictable. So you might see a trend, you might start to write your screenplay, and all of a sudden that trend changes, and now your screenplay is not sellable. Also, it's going to be about quality and originality. High quality scripts with unique concepts and strong storytelling have a better chance of standing out. But also, you've got this massive networking aspect, and that can be a non-starter for some people. When it comes to books, the literary merit is a really important part of it. Having a unique voice, having strong writing, great storytelling, all of that's going to appeal to an agent or a publisher. But again, you're going to need to fit into the market. You're going to need to fit into popular genres or niche markets that can enhance your marketability. And also, and this is something I say all the time and nobody wants to hear it, you need an author platform. You need to have a strong author platform that can influence an author's impact, and it can influence how many people hear about you, and it can influence a publisher's decision to acquire your book. That's really important. So in terms of chances of success, both screenplays and books can achieve success. It can happen, but the path to success can vary. And I think that screenplays have fewer opportunities for production compared to the number of books published each year. So this is really, really important for me to stress. This is why I say, go for the book first. The film industry tends to be way more selective. Why? Because there are high costs and risks associated with production. Whereas in the book publishing industry, you can have a small run, or you can have self-publishing and it's not costing anyone anything. So I know that the choice really depends on you, and I'm really interested in knowing what you end up going with. But if I had to, as a professional writing coach, steer you in one direction or another, I would definitely say start with a book and then start building that platform and those abilities that help you to market that book to then be optioned as a script. That way you've got the best of both worlds. That's the dream right there. But if you don't want to do a script, you don't have to. Whereas if you're doing a script and it doesn't go anywhere, you end up with nothing. So consider all of that. And I hope this helped you to think about the pros and the cons. It helped you to decide what you want to do with your writing career and with your next writing project. And I look forward to being with you next time on the How to Be an Author podcast. If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.